The wind keened along the ramparts of Winterfell in thin, icy threads that hissed through arrow slits and rattled the elder ironwood shutters. Snowflakes, brittle as ground glass, swarmed the torch glow like pale moths and died against the flames. Lord Brandon Stark, 33rd of his name and Warden of the North, stood upon the battlements with his cloak snapping behind him, eyes fixed upon the star-flecked vault. A stray gust peeled the hood from his black hair, revealing a brow carved in the stark geometry of an heirloom face, long, solemn, and already weather-worn at 35. Some men scowled at storms. Brandon listened, as if parsing the voice of the gods carried in every shiver of frost. Below him, Winterfell slumbered in tiered courtyards, veiled by chimney steam. The forges had gone quiet, yet the walls still radiated the stored heat of day, like the slow heartbeat of an aging wolf. Within that warmth lay his wife, Lady Alys Stark, heavy with their second child. Within it, too, played their wild son, young Kragan, with a blunted wooden sword. Brandon felt gratitude for each breath they took, but tonight, gratitude was not enough to hush the thrumming restlessness beneath his ribs. Above the tilting sea of roofs, the old god's weirwood thrust its white limbs skyward, and its red leaves rippled like scattered drops of blood. The tree had spoken to him since boyhood. At first, so he once told his maester, it merely whispered. Now it murmured with the cadence of prophecy, teaching him a tongue of creaking boughs and rustling veins until he woke fluent in dread. Dreams of a blighted crown wrought from frost lingered on waking, dreams of silent ranks with eyes like shards of day-old ice. In daylight, he dismissed them as phantoms of autumnal melancholy. Yet the gods would never lied. Every Stark remembered that truth, though few dared dwell upon it. A raven fluttered down, talons clacking atop the crenelle just beside him. Its feathers were so black they swallowed torchlight, and threaded in those feathers shone a single pale plume, almost silver. Brandon turned his head. The bird cocked its own glassy eyes bright, waiting. He hummed a one-note greeting, learned from his father's rookery cages. The raven croaked a reply that was not quite a word, not quite a warning, and took wing toward the wolfswood to the west, scattering snow from the merlons. He tracked it until it vanished against the night. Behind him, the flagstones clicked. Boots approached. Sir Walton Manderley, broad as two bulls and sworn sword these 15 years, drew beside him, breath fogging. "Cold for wandering, my lord," Lady Alice frets. Walton's voice ever rumbled like stones in a river. Brandon did not answer at once, reluctant to break the melody of the wind. When he finally spoke, it was softer than the raven's wings. "The old gods are uneasy. I can feel their worry in my marrow." Walton looked out across the silent bailey. War worries every man. Bolton banners stir again in the Dreadfort. He spat. Flayed lordlings with cruel hearts. "Boltons," Brandon echoed, though his thoughts already drifted past that mundane menace to something older, colder, hidden, beyond the ragged teeth of the wall. "The Boltons I know how to fight. There are others whose war songs predate ours." He exhaled a plume of frost. "Send word to Castle Black. Ask the Lord Commander what their ranging parties have seen under the Aurora." Walton's brows rose. "The Night's Watch? You fear wildlings?" "I fear what might march in their wake," Brandon murmured. He shut his eyes. In the darkness behind lids, he saw antlers of ice branching from a corpse-crowned king. When he opened them, the courtyard's lanterns flared and guttered, throwing red shadows across fresh snow. By first light, he was in the library tower, poring over worm-chewed scrolls copied centuries ago by septon scribes who never crossed the neck. Records of white shadows stalking Barrowton's barrow fields in the days before Winterfell, of silent winters where mothers birthed stillborn babes, glazed in hoarfrost. Each margin bore cryptic scrawls from Stark stewards long dead. "Burned the body, it rose screaming, or cut it. The wound did not bleed, it smoked." He lingered over those frantic annotations far longer than the proper verses. Ink and terror never faded completely. That evening brought an embassy from the last hearth. Lord Alaric Umber's youngest son Theon, towering even at 17, cheeks chafed raw from the ride south. He presented Brandon with a coarse sack tied at the neck. Inside lay a dagger of black glass, obsidian honed so keen it might slice hair. The blade was cold to the touch, yet when Brandon's fingers brushed the hilt, a prickle like sparks flared along his forearm, as if the weapon were a conduit for storms. Theon unfolded a letter sealed with hardened pitch, found lodged in the heart of a frozen giant north of the Bridge of Skulls. No ordinary spearhead. We do not hunt giants on the Frostfang cliffs. Giants hunt us. Take this, Stark of Winterfell. We think you will know its worth. That night, Brandon carried the dragonglass to the Godswood. The moon hung low and sallow. The weirwood's crimson leaves dripped moonlight back into the reflecting pool. He knelt in the snow and pressed the edge against his palm until blood welled bright. The pool accepted each droplet in widening rings that shattered the moon's face. Wind shook the branches, and he thought he heard a woman's voice woven in the rustle, soft, sorrowful, and urgently coaxing. No mortal throat spoke that voice. He bled beside the pool until pain blurred with clarity. Visions spilled from the weirwood's knot eyes. A ring of stones, 12 figures in forest shadow. A man bound to one of those stones with rawhide and weeping saplings braided through his arm. Slender hands of dark green pressed a sliver of dragonglass to flesh just above his heart. His scream tore leaves from branches and sent them spiraling into a night across which danced blue embers, not of fire, but of death come alive. Brandon lurched upright, breath ragged. Snow had buried his knees, yet he felt no cold, only a strange hunger thrumming beneath his ribs, as if the winter itself wished to inhabit the hollow spaces of his bones. He staggered from the Godswood in silence, leaving a trail of red droplets that steamed upon the frosted stones. Days passed measured in omens. A litter of direwolf pups, born gray, turned ghost white over a single night. A man of the watch arrived from Castle Black, half mad, eyes smoking with fever. He died before dawn, skin blue as cornflowers. Maester Luwin's ravens shed feathers in the rookery, crops empty though they were offered grain. Every sign marked an inflection point, a hinge of fate rotating beneath Winterfell's foundations. Brandon sought counsel in the crypts. Descending with only a lantern, he walked between the carved stone kings whose eyes were shards of black basalt. At the feet of King Edric Snowbeard he halted and knelt. "Great-grandfather," he whispered, lantern casting restless shadows in the hollows of Edric's chiseled face, "tell me how to guard the blood you entrusted to me." Silence answered. Yet in that hush he felt a cold draught pull past him deeper into darkness. Lantern flame bent toward the unseen corridor beckoned. He followed. Steps wound lower than he recalled, air thinning until breath plumed silvery. At last the passage widened into a cavern unused by any living Stark. In its center yawned a well, no, a shaft, encircled by unfathomable black. Ice crystals bind the stones as if the rock itself had exhaled winter. He angled the lantern and glimpsed carvings along the lip. Spiral motifs, tangled runes older than runes, patterns that turned upon themselves like snow, whirling in eddies of wind. A pulse emanated from below, slow and sonorous, like a second heart beating in time with his own. A voice parted the stillness, mellow yet metallic, speaking the first tongue. He understood without learning. "We remember you, Brandon of the Wolf's blood. We will not be forgotten. Come to us beyond the wall where night is born." Lantern shattered against the stone. Darkness rushed in, but he did not feel blind. Pale blue gleam swelled at the shaft's throat, swelling like dawn reversed, an upwelling of frostlight. Fear rooted him, but fascination pried those roots loose. When the glow receded, he staggered back along the tunnel, heart-thudding phantom beats. Above ground, Winterfell's towers seemed distant as stranger keeps. He found Lady Alice nursing Cregan beside the hearth in their solar. Her violet eyes, gift of some long-dead Cosstock mother, widened at his pallor. "My love, you've been gone hours. Your hands, they're like ice." She pressed warm fingers to his cheek. Something within him recoiled from that heat, yet he forced himself to lean into it until the numb ache eased. He promised her a dawn ride together and retreated to the balcony, where snow fell so silently it felt conspiratorial. Walton approached at sunrise bearing a sealed parchment. The Night's Watch reply: wildling fires sighted along the Milkwater. Rangers whisper of shapes moving through snow that leave no prints. Cold winds carry screams. Request more dragonglass if Winterfell can spare it. Brandon traced the wax with his thumb. Dragonglass, yes. He ordered every man at Queenscrown and Deepwood Motte to scour for obsidian beneath old volcanic cones. He dispatched smiths to experiment with dragonglass arrowheads despite warnings the brittle stone would shatter. In the Great Hall, he held audiences beneath the gray banners of direwolves, granting gold to prospectors and safe passage to maesters scouring flooded mines for ancient fire-wrought glass. Lady Ace grew restless. "You've become as distant as the moon," she accused one frost-bright twilight. "I married a man, not a prophecy." Her words stung because they were true, yet prophecy had taken shape in his reflection. In the color leaching from his hair like pigment from bone. In new lines around his eyes, itched by too many midnights, spent communing with silent gods. Banners of the Dreadfort unfurled across the eastern horizon 2 weeks later. Lord Roger Bolton rode beneath a flag of flayed man, crimson on pink dyed. He demanded guest right to discuss border raids. Brandon granted entry, though every instinct begged refusal. In the Great Hall, Bolton's pale, elegant face curved with predatory courtesy. "Winter consumes more than fields this year," he said, folding slim hands. "My reavers vanish upon silent nights. Tracks lead toward the wall, then end." He leaned forward. "Your ravens whisper you gather glass knives and speak to ghosts. I will know the truth." The flayed man burned in Bolton's eyes. Brandon's reply came unbidden, chill as Cellarstone. "If truth is what you seek, ride beyond the wall under the aurora. The cold will educate you." Bolton's smile cracked. His nights shifted like hounds scenting bear. Yet he did not betray the guest right. He withdrew, though hate lingered in his shadow. That night, Brandon dreamed of his forefather Bran, the builder forging black ice chains, across a storm-tossed sea, while wolf sentries howled upon frost-locked shores. When he woke, the air smelled of pine pitch, though no torches burned, and his breath smoked such that frost rhymed the bedposts. Lady Alice slept curled against their daughter newly birthed 2 nights past. He laid a pale hand upon the babe's brow, and felt her pulse flutter. But beneath that fragile warmth lay a current of cold answering him. He recoiled, horror twisting his gut into knots. He fled to the godswood and paced beneath the weirwood as dawn bruised the sky. Leaves shivered though no wind stirred. He pressed his bleeding palm once again to its bone-white trunk and whispered, "How do I save them?" A rush of images drowned reason. A spiral of standing stones in a snow-wasted forest. 12 weeping figures, a spear of glass descending. When his mind surfaced, he knelt before a child no taller than his hip. Skin carved from mossy bark, eyes gold as lantern flame. One of the children stood in Winterfell's heart, face sorrow hollow, dot out. "You are late, Brandon Snowblood," the child said, tongue lilting like water. "Late, yet there is still a shard of dawn before the true night falls." She extended twig-thin fingers and pressed a pine cone into his hand. Rotating its scales, he found each tip inlaid with pinpoints of obsidian. "They once called us sigils of hope," the child murmured. "Plant this beyond the wall, where the forest yet remembers its own heart. If it roots, the darkness may know a cage again. If it withers, the cage will shatter, and all songs will hush." "Neverdiane." He opened his mouth to question, but frost sighed through the boughs. Then the child was gone, her footprints filling with snow as if she had never trod there. Brandon's pulse hammered. Duty clearer than fevered visions now. He must ride north of the wall. Preparations consumed 3 days. Walton assembled 50 picked men. Archers, trappers, charcoal-skinned brothers sworn to Brandon in their youth, each armed with obsidian knives and furs lined in moleskin. Lady Alice stood upon the drawbridge as they departed. Cregan clutched her skirts, tear tracks icy on his cheeks. Brendan dismounted to kneel before his son. "Guard your mother. Remember our words." Cregan's chin trembled. "Winter is coming," he whispered. Brendan kissed his brow, savoring warmth he feared he would forget. At last he swung into the saddle and turned north, the dragging howl of the gate echoing behind like a closing tomb. The march to Castle Black spanned bitter leagues of snow-blind moor. Along the King's Road they passed half-buried cairns marking strangers lost to cold. Nightly, Brandon dreamt in flickers. A weirwood weeping sap, a stag frozen mid-gallop, a crown of ice clasping his own skull. He woke each time with breath misting and heart slowed to a crawl. Rangers greeted them atop the wall, a shimmering spine of blue-white stretching across the world. Lord Commander Jeremy Riker offered hot iron bread and fresh-cut logs for the barracks hearth. His eyes were shadow-ringed. "Whatever haunts the forest drives game south and men mad," he told Brandon. One man returned without a head, yet his body walked 2 more miles spilling no blood. He ground knuckles against his brow. Free folk whisper of the Old One, a king with skin of rime. Brandon's blood went molten and cold in the same instant. That night he walked the top of the wall alone. Moonlight spilled across the frozen river of ice beneath his boots. Every brittle footfall cracked loud as breaking bone. Beyond, the haunted forest spread in infinite teeth of black pines. Stars whirled overhead like sparks from an unseen forge. There, on that razor's edge between realms, Brandon Stark felt his life pivot toward myth. At dawn he led his company through the gate at the Shadow Tower, entering a wilderness painted in hoarfrost. Snow-muffled hooves, breath plumed quick and silver. Hours became days. They glimpsed mammoth skeletons entombed in frozen bogs, heard distant drums echoing across white valleys with no visible drummers. One man vanished while gathering deadwood. They found him at dusk, eyes pale, his own obsidian knife thrust between ribs. No prints ringed his corpse, only a faint spiral pattern of disturbed snow. On the 9th night, they reached the circle of stones from Brandon's vision. 12 monoliths jutted from the clearing like jagged teeth, their inner faces carved with crude weir faces contorted in agony. The air felt brittle, each inhale razored the throat. The pinecone talisman pulsed cold in Brandon's glove. He knelt at the circle's heart, scraped snow aside, and carved a shallow hollow. He planted the cone, covering it with black earth sifted from beneath frost, then sliced his palm anew, letting blood sluice into the soil. As the last drop fell, wind screamed through the stones. Then all sound evaporated, snuffed like a candle. Ice coalesced on Brandon's lashes. A figure stepped between the stones without stirring snow. It stood as a man might, yet taller, shoulders mantled in shards that glittered blue. Its flesh was crystalline pallor, eyes radiant with azure lethality. Sword of unearthly ice in hand, it regarded Brandon with a sorrow so intense his knees buckled. He knew, without words, that this creature wore what Brandon might become, a mirror of an unwritten future. Steel rang as Walton's men drew blades, but frost spread from the creature's feet in skeletal branches, freezing scabbards to hips. Walton cursed, blade stuck fast. Brandon rose, meeting that frigid gaze. At his belt hung the obsidian dagger gifted by the Umbers. Hand trembling, he drew it. The creature inclined its head, an acknowledgement, challenge, or farewell. Brandon could not say. He hurled the dagger. Black glass spun in moonlight, lodging deep in the creature's chest. A harmonic hum rippled outward, rattling teeth and skulls. Blue light fractured. The creature arched, body fissuring like lake ice in thaw. It shattered soundlessly, snow devils swirling to fill the space it left. Silence followed, thick as grave earth. Brandon's palm throbbed, blood dripping upon the fresh mound. Where drops fell, faint shoots of green pushed through the snow, unfurling tiny needles tipped in black stone. The cone had rooted. He felt a cord tighten between his own heart and that sprout, a tether binding him to the forest and the frost alike. Walton approached, awe and fear warring in his eyes. "My lord, what have we done?" Brandon gazed up. Above the stone circle, the aurora stirred, veils of emerald and violet, flickering like great banners across a darkling sky. In their shifting glow he sensed vast shapes moving, armies unborn, winters unmeasured. The gods had taken his blood, planted it in frozen soil. Whatever grew would not be simple pine. When they returned to the wall, a fortnight later, the Watchers swore the clearing behind them no longer existed. Rangers who attempted to find it spoke of endless white and disorienting silence. Yet Brandon carried proof. A single black-tipped needle afloat in a vial of sap, pulsing faintly like a captured heartbeat. Winterfell welcomed him with bells and blazing hearths. Yet warmth felt alien now, as though he wore an invisible shroud of rime. Cregan sprinted into his arms, joy bright as dawn. Brandon lifted the boy high, but where father and son touched, frost bloomed in delicate filigree across Cregan's leather jerkin. Ice gasped. Brandon set the child down gently, forcing a smile that pained him. He retreated to the solitude of his solar before the family felt the chills spreading deeper. That night he stood before the mirror of polished bronze once gifted by a southern ally. He barely recognized the reflection. Skin pale as new snow, veins faint sapphire, eyes rimmed in ghostly blue light. He lifted a shaking hand and exhaled, breath crystallized before the glass, feathering a lattice of frost over his own image until nothing remained but swirling white. In the courtyard, ravens erupted from towers in a black storm, croaking in terror as they circled the sky. Far to the north, thunder boomed and no clouds marred the stars. Brandon Stark, Lord of Winterfell, felt that thunder pulse through his blood like a summons, and beneath its beat, a song older than men, promising a crown wrought in endless night. He closed his eyes to listen. The wind outside answered, howling through merlons and murder holes, threading corridors with the promise of snow without end. Though fires burned bright in every hearth, frost crept along the stones, quiet and relentless, seeking the core of every living thing. Winter was no longer merely coming. It had found its king. The days that followed unfolded with the bone-slow inevitability of a glacier grinding down a mountain. Winterfell's courtyards bustled as though nothing had changed. Smiths striking sparks from anvils, kennel boys whistling at hounds, septons chanting over the infirm. Yet beneath every outward rhythm lurked a hush too deep for mortal ears. Even the ravens ceased their squabbling in the rookery. They huddled silent, feathers puffed, eyes bright as onyx, watching Brandon Stark like augurs reading the entrails of a living man. At dawn he walked the castle as he had in years past, greeting guardsmen by name, offering a steadying hand to a servant lugging firewood, pausing to speak softly with the stablemaster about the foaling of a new gray mare. Yet wherever he stepped, rhyme spread behind him in delicate traceries before the sun could gild the stones. When children skipped past on errands, their breath fogging the air, they felt a shudder without knowing why and hurried on faster. Lady Aelys watched him from high windows, one hand pressed to the embroidered swell of a nursing gown, her violet eyes wide with questions he dared not voice. In the solar she confronted him at last, just the two of them, tapestries muffling every sound. "Your touch chills the milk to curd," she said, voice low but fierce. "Our daughter wakes crying, blue-lipped, whenever you stand near her cradle. Tell me what curse rides your shadow, husband." Brandon's answer tasted of iron and midnight. "The old gods carved something out of me beyond the wall. I bleed winter now, Alice. Yet I remain Brandon in my will, and I would sooner cut my own throat than harm what is mine to protect." Is that a promise or a warning? She reached to take his hand. Frost filmed her fingertips before she could close them around his. She hissed and withdrew. Tears trembled but did not fall. "Swear the children are safe." He opened his mouth and felt the life freeze on his tongue. Instead he whispered, "I am building a bulwark no southern mason could envision. But until I master this, frost in my bones, I must live apart." Yendero. "So you would be a ghost in your own halls?" "A sentinel." Her chin lifted in proud defiance, Karstark steel tempered in tenderness. Then build your bulwark, Brandon. But remember, a wall of ice can keep a man safe or entomb him. That night he moved his bed to the highest watchtower, a draft-scoured spire long used only by owls. He spread wolf skins upon the floor, and sat cross-legged beneath an aperture where moonlight pooled on frost-white stone. In his lap, he placed the vial that contained the black-tipped needle. The sap around it had thickened into translucent amber, pulsing faintly. He attuned his breath to that slow beat. 1, 2, 1, 2, until his heart matched it and the wind outside seemed to breathe through him. Visions stirred behind his eyes, a spiral road of ice descending through an ocean of night. Torches guttering into wisps, voices chanting in a tongue older than leaf or root. And at the end of that road an archway wrought from rib bones, set in a wall where snowflakes fell upward instead of down. Beyond the arch waited a figure, in a mantle of dark feathers rimed with hoarfrost. Its face was a blur of indigo flames, but its eyes, those eyes belonged to Brandon Stark. He jerked awake, throat raw, to find dawn bleeding pale along the edge of sky. The vial's amber glowed brighter, the needle inside grown half a finger's length, its obsidian tip branching like the point of a spear. Walton Manderley climbed the tower steps as Brandon bound the vial back into its leather cradle. The big knight's beard glittered with frost, though he had climbed with haste. "My lord," riders approach. Barroton banners, Lady Dustin's. Her nephew, Ser Artos, leads them. They bear a covered wagon and a wooden cage. "Mepsrandi." Brandon descended. In the bailey, snow squealed beneath his boots, though the morning sun glared bright. Ser Artos dismounted, gaunt cheeks hollow beneath a wolfskin cowl. He bowed stiffly. "We hunted bandits pillaging barrow mounds, my lord. Found something worse." He gestured. The wagon canvas lifted to reveal a corpse strapped upright. The body wore scavenged mail. Its flesh bloomed in bruised shades of blue and black, yet its open eyes burned an unholy cerulean. Chains of bronze pinioned its wrists and ankles, but still it fought, jaws snapping. No breath steamed its lips. The courtyard erupted in panicked shouts as onlookers recoiled. Brandon strode forward, every pulse of his blood answering the corpse's strange life. With a whispered order he cleared the yard and drew the obsidian dagger, the mate to the one lost beyond the wall, from his belt. The creature's sapphire gaze fixed on the blade. It hissed like snow on coals. Walton approached with torch in hand. "Say the word, and I'll burn it, my lord." "Wait." Brandon's voice was quiet thunder. He plunged the dagger into the corpse's heart. The body spasmed. Blue light shattered into drifting motes. Rot spread in an instant, flesh blackening, collapsing inward until bones split and sagged. Within heartbeats, nothing remained but a husk of ash that crumbled to dust upon the wagon boards. Silence followed, broken only by the distant caw of nervous ravens. Brandon turned to Artos. "How far from Winterfell did you find it?" 3 leagues south of the Barrowlands. The distance sounded like a judgment, the wall's ancient oath echoing. Here the realm ends. Yet the realm's end had moved. Septa Janelle tended Winterfell's sickbed wing, yet her simples did little for those stricken with a feverless chill that left lips blue and pulses thready. 5 fell ill by nightfall, 2 scullions, a mason, and twin daughters of the brewmaster. They shivered though blanketed, complaining of voices singing through the stones. When Brandon entered, the torch flames in their sconces guttered low, and the patients stilled, eyes rolling toward him. They spoke in unison, rasping syllables of the first tongue, fragmentary phrases of supplication and command. Septa Janelle crossed herself in the southern fashion. Brandon knelt beside the youngest girl, a slip of 9. Her breath steamed out only when he laid his hand upon her brow. Through that contact he felt the cold pulsing under her skin, searching him like blind fingers. But his cold answered, and the foreign chill recoiled. The girl exhaled one great cloud, then sagged against her pillow, sweat beading on her now pink cheeks. Within the hour, every patient sat up bewildered but alive, color returning. The Septa stammered thanks, but Brandon left without a word. He knew what had passed. Winter recognized its own and spared those beneath its aegis. For now, news from the south arrived on the wings of terrified doves. Travelers spoke of an early frost whitening fields near Moat Cailin. Small folk whispered of snow shadows hunting by moonlight. Lord Bolton abandoned the dread fort, riding hard for the twins behind steel-clad outriders. At White Harbor, fishers dragged up nets filled with silver-eyed corpses of herring frozen solid, scales dusted in frost despite seawater brine. Inside Winterfell's war room, Brandon unfurled a battered map of the north, its vellum edges curled and sewn with threadbare repairs. Around him gathered Walton, Maester Luwin, Lady Alice, in a cloak so thick the ermine collar swallowed her slender neck, and Sir Geron Risewell, who commanded the garrison archers. Brandon placed a stone on the map above the Barrowlands. Here the dead walk. Another stone above the King's Road halfway to Moat Cailin. Here the rivers freeze while water still flows in the weir. A third stone north of White Harbor. Here cold hunts the sea. His fingertip traced an invisible crescent connecting those marks. Lady Alice spoke first. It encircles us. She sounded surprised to hear the truth aloud. Encroaches, Luwin corrected. His maester's chain rattled. We hold the hearth at Winter's heart, until the heart stops beating. Sir Geron muttered, hands fidgeting on the fletching of an arrow that wasn't there. Walton laid thick fingers on Brandon's shoulder. My lord, give the order to call banners. Let every northern house march, dragon's beard or no delay. Darian. Brandon looked upon each face, measuring fear, loyalty, love. I will call them, he said, but not to Winterfell. Silence. He let it settle. My place is north of the wall. This war begins where the living lands end. Luwin shook his head. You would abandon your seat on the eve of siege? I would confront the siege before it sets foot upon my soil. Walton's eyes smoldered with unspoken protest, but he inclined his head. Then Winterfell marches too. No. Brandon's voice cracked like ice-splitting stone. I march alone. A handful may ride as witnesses. The realm's armies must remain to guard those I leave behind. Winterfell's walls will not fall while dire wolves keep watch. Danger. Alis stepped forward, cloak swirling. What of your children's father? Will they keep watch for his return or mourn his cairn? A quaver shivered through the hall's torchlight. Brandon fought the surge of frost within him, mastering it as one might break a stallion. I will return. He forced warmth into the promise, though he no longer trusted warmth to hold shape. That night he walked the Godswood with allies at his side. Snowflakes clung to her lashes. They stopped beneath the weirwood. Its red leaves flickered like dying embers. My mother told me, Alice whispered, that when a Stark dies far from Winterfell, the old gods send a dire wolf to guide his spirit home. Will she send 2 wolves if I become something else? Brandon asked. Alice touched the scar beneath his left eye, one he'd earned in a childhood mishap scaling the granary roof. If the old gods love what you were, they will fight for what you may yet be. She drew a bronze dagger from her belt and sliced her palm. Blood welled dark against her pale skin. Holding her hand above the roots, she let drops patter on the snow. I offer them a mother's plea, she said. Guide or chain my husband, whatever saves our children. Brandon bowed his head. He raised his own palm, reopening the weirwood scar. Their mingled blood steamed together, soaking into the earth. Leaves rustled overhead, though no wind stirred. Somewhere beneath the soil, the roots drank. Preparation lasted the span of a heartbeat and an eternity. Brandon selected 12 companions. Walton, stalwart until death. Sir Geron the archer, Maester Luwin the frail, insisted on chronicling. Theon Umber, whose strength matched Walton's, 3 skilled huntsmen surnamed Snow, bastards of lesser houses, and 5 spear wives from the gift who had sworn to the watch in exile yet remained wild at heart. Each carried dragonglass-tipped spears or arrows, obsidian knives, and torches wound in oil-scent cloth that burned hotter than pitch. Prior to departure, Brandon visited the crypts once more. He paused before the effigy of Edrian Stark, the so-called Silent Wolf, who legend claimed never spoke after the long night until the day his heart ceased. Brandon knelt, gloved hand tracing the carved direwolf at Edrian's feet. "If I fail, grant my tongue your silence," he murmured. "If I succeed, let my voice carry summer home." From the statue's lap, he lifted an ancient longsword, ice-pale steel with runes half worn, its leather scabbard hardened like bark. Few living men remembered it. Fewer still dared wield it. Brandon strapped it across his back. They rode north amid swirling snow so dense it erased horizons. Past the last hearth they found villages abandoned, fires still crackling in hearths, though no footprints marred the drifts. Snow stung like cinders. At Queen's Crown they sheltered in a watchtower whose night fire guttered low, only to wake surrounded by silent shadowed forms that melted once Brandon stood, as if the cold itself bowed and retreated before a higher frost. His companions eyed him with mingled awe and dread. On the fourth night, auroras unfurled across the heavens. Waves of emerald and indigo and bleeding rose. Under that spectral tide the forest glittered with diamond dust, and every icicle sang a faint, chiming note. They pressed on. At the wall, Lord Commander Wrecker met them grim-faced. "Every ranger I send comes back raving or not at all. The haunted forest belongs to ghosts now." "Ghosts of men," Brandon said. "Or something older?" "Both, I fear." Brandon led his 12th through the black gate at the night fort. Stone mouths wheezing open as if the wall itself sensed their purpose. On the far side, cold lay so thick it dulled sound. Every breath seemed to freeze into sharp crystals that pricked lungs from within. Tracks of undead feet ran like dark ribbons through the snow, leading west. They followed at a wary distance. 3 days beyond the wall, they reached a frozen lake encircled by ancient pines. At its center rose an island crowned by a skeletal weirwood, its bark gray as dawn, its leaves long fallen, leaving branches like bleached antlers. In its roots nestled a ring of standing stones shaped in the twisting spiral motif. "They're gathering," Walton murmured. Across the ice moved slow columns of the dead, wildlings and Night's Watch and southern farmhands alike, flesh frost-cured, eyes blazing blue. Among them walked pale figures armored in ice, tall and silent. At their forefront strode one wearing a crown wrought of jagged frost. Brandon's heartbeat answered that presence with shuddering intensity. He felt the pulsing of the talisman needle strapped against his chest, aligned to the crowned figure's gait. The resonance tugged at him like tidal pull. Jaren knocked a dragonglass arrow. "Say the word." "Not yet," Brandon breathed. The undead hordes encircled the island, but did not set foot upon it. The crowned one alone ascended the broken roots, halting beneath the dead weirwood. It turned, and Brandon saw his own face carved in ice, yet older, regal, expressionless. Leuven gasped. Brandon stepped onto the lake. Ice groaned, cracks spiderwebbed. With each pace, frost fused beneath his boots, bearing his weight. He walked until he stood opposite his mirror across 20 paces of black ice. The crown wielder raised an arm. In its hand curved a sword of clear crystal emitting whispers, as though each flake of snow served as a tongue for a choir of blizzards. It leveled the blade in salute, a knight greeting a peer. Brandon drew the ancient longsword from his back. The runes caught aurora light, glimmering faintly. He returned the salute. No words passed, yet meaning coursed through the silent air. Brother, shadow, air. Then the creature reversed its grip and drove the point into its own chest. Cracks raced across its torso, the crown fractured, shards spinning out in a cyclone of sparkling dust. Its body collapsed, leaving only the sword standing upright in the ice, humming. From the wound spilled not blood, but a writhing mist of midnight blue that spiraled across the lake toward Brandon, entering the runes of his sword, racing up the blade into his arms, his lungs, his eyes. He staggered. The lake beneath him glowed, as though lit from below by the aurora's buried twin. His companions called his name, but the sound reached him dimly through roaring wind. Visions collided. Every winter since the first, every snowflake's crystalline memory, every death by frost, every hearth's final ember. Within that deluge he saw wars yet unwaged. Fields of black glass where Winterfell once stood. A snarling wolf carved from wind beside a shattered king, dead yet unbowed. His sword exploded in silver sparks. He fell to one knee, breath a storm of rime. When he rose, the glow subsided. The crowned corpse was gone, sword melted into a puddle that refroze instantly. The undead lines around the lake knelt, their blue eyes dimming to pale smoke. Brandon turned to his 12. Snow eddied around him yet did not touch him. In his chest beat a heart, neither holy flesh nor holy ice. A confluence, a hinge. "I know their song now," he said. His voice rang like distant bells. "I can command or unmake them." Walton swallowed, then commanded them to die. Brandon glanced at the kneeling throng. A gesture, and bodies collapsed, snow drifting over inert forms. Steam rose, mingling with falling flakes. Silence swallowed the clearing. Jaren whispered, "It is done." Brandon answered, "The dead are unmade, but night remains. I feel another will reaching beyond the horizon." A crack in the wall where darkness seeps. "We patched a wound, not cured the plague. Now and to." Maester Llewellyn approached, quill trembling. "What must we do?" Brendan lifted his gaze north, past the forests, past unknown glaciers. "I must travel further, to the heart of winter. There lies the source. There, perhaps, I can seal the breach, or become its master." Walton stepped forward. "You will not go alone." Brendan's smile was a winter dawn, pale, austere, resolute. "Some roads are meant for a single set of footprints. Yet I ask one boon. Carry news to Winterfell. Tell Elise our children live, and summer's seed still sleeps in their blood." "I'm Siwaya." "What of yours?" Llewellyn murmured. Brandon looked upon his gloved hands, memory of warmth flickering like a distant hearth. "My blood is already winter's." He pressed the vial into Walton's palm. "The talisman will shield Winterfell if ice storms press." "Plant it beside the weirwood where our blood spilled together," he instructed. "Should its needles turn white, flee south. The wall of men will have fallen." Walton's eyes brimmed. He clasped Brandon's forearm in farewell. "Winter may claim your veins, my lord, but not your honor." Brandon turned then, striding north across the frozen lake. With every step the ice beneath him glowed faintly, as though drawing light from hidden moonstones. He neither looked back nor slowed. Auroras swirled overhead like banners of some vast, unseen army. The forest closed behind him, branches knitting soundlessly, concealing his path as though the world itself wished to forget a man it could not contain. Walton, Llewellyn, and the remaining companions watched until the last trace of him vanished beyond the pines. Only then did Walton breathe. He wrapped the vial in furs, tied it to his belt, and turned south. Days later, as they crested a ridge overlooking the wall, Walton paused. A shudder tremored through the ancient ice, as if something titanic stirred beneath. Auroras dimmed, but in the sky's faint glow, he thought he saw a lone figure upon the distant horizon, walking deeper into night, trailed by ghosts no longer bound in flesh. At Winterfell, Lady Alice stood in the Godswood when the vial was planted at the weirwood's roots. She felt the pulse beneath the earth align with her own heartbeat, and for the first time since Brandon's departure, warmth coursed through her limbs without pain. She watched green needles unfurl, black-tipped, glistening in torchlight. Around her the snow stilled, as if listening. She whispered into the silence, "Guide him home." Deep beyond the furthest marches of man, Brandon Stark pressed onward. The wind no longer bit, it bowed. Glaciers cracked open to reveal caverns hung with frozen starlight, and in their depths the children's lost songs echoed. He followed them toward a place where time writhed like smoke and ice, remembered fire. Each mile stripped away warmth, but within that theft he discovered power. The power to quell night or crown it. At the edge of the world he found a throne sculpted from an ancient comet's heart, crystal ice veined with blue flame. He stood before it, sword of rune steel in hand, and felt two paths unfold. Sit and rule winter everlasting, shatter it, and spend the last ember of his mortal soul. Behind him stretched the long road home, faint as memory yet burning with names. Ala's Cregan, a newborn daughter's laugh, the weirwood's whisper, the promised summer. Before him waited night's dominion, terrible and exact, offering clarity colder than mercy. He lifted the sword. Its runes flared, reflecting aurora fire, reflecting a man forged of duty and dread. He set the blade's point against the throne's luminous flank. Ice sang. Dot. Somewhere south of the wall, a pine cone's needles trembled, shedding a single tear of sap the color of starlight. Lady Alice looked up, heart pounding. In the heavens, the aurora twisted into spirals, green and violet braiding like twin threads of fate. The night caught its breath. Brandon Stark drove the sword forward. The throne shattered in a blizzard of shards, light bursting skyward like dawn reversing itself through darkness. The blast barreled across the desolation, turning glaciers to diamond powder, scouring valleys, racing toward the unseen sea. In its wake stood only a man kneeling, steam rising from his tunic, where blood warmed the air once more. His breath fogged and dispersed. He rose slowly, body trembling, eyes blinking against sudden tears. Hot, alive snow clung to his lashes and melted. He tasted salt. The wind returned, no longer bowing, but no longer hostile, merely wind. He turned south, sword shattered to the hilt, fragments glittering in the snow like fallen stars. He began the long walk home. Far away, in Winterfell's godswood, green needles flushed red at their tips as the weirwood accepted new memory. Lady Alice pressed a hand to her heart and whispered his name. Her breath clouded the air, not in fear, but in prayer. Behind Brandon, night gathered its broken pieces, reshaping them into whispers that would haunt men's hearth tales for millennia. None would recall the true name of the one who shattered the first throne of ice. They would remember only the terror he defied, and the echoes of his footsteps drifting south on winter's wind. Footsteps that promised while men kept flame and fathers kept faith, night could be driven back. Even if someday, it returned wearing a crown once more. Ka. Brandon Stark eased one splintered boot through the powdery drift, and felt the crusted snow surrender beneath his weight. Not cracking as ice would crack, not complaining as timber would complain, but sighing, as though the ancient world itself acknowledged each exhausted stride. The blizzard he had conjured, by destroying the Comet Heart throne, had burned itself out 2 days past. In its wake lay a landscape new, dunned in glimmering alabaster, silent but for the distant moan of a river still struggling beneath its newborn lid of blue glass. With every measured breath, he tasted brine and copper, and the thin, unwholesome sweetness of far-off saplings erupting through frost. That sweetness reminded him of home. He pressed on. His sword was no more than a hilt now, the blade surrendered transfixed within the throne's detonation. Yet Brandon still carried the scabbard, slung across his back, like the memory of a vow. Sometimes he imagined the absent steel humming there, singing of debts unpaid. The weightless scabbard struck his hip each time his gait faltered. A phantom nudge from the gods. Do not sleep. Do not forget. Do not succumb to the false mercy of the snowbed. On the third dusk, he reached a ridge where the wind scoured the slopes clean, revealing a sheet of black rock polished as a mirror. Even through the radiant cold, it retained a faint warmth, azurite seams glowing beneath its glassy surface. Brandon knelt, pressed a bare palm to the rock, and felt the throbbing pulse of magma leagues below, like the heart of a sleeping drake. The world was not wholly ice after all. Fire persisted in hidden chambers, waiting for a Stark or a dragon to wake it. He whispered, thanks to the vanished smiths who forged the world. Let this ember endure until men remember how to shield it. Below that ridge sprawled the shivering plain, 1,000 square leagues of whiteness dappled by broken fang-like towers of ice. They clutched at the sky as starving men clutch at bread, and between them coiled misty channels whose depths swallowed moonlight. Brandon descended one careful step after another, weaving among crevasses that exhaled frigid vapors. He marked each perilous void with a chunk of dark basalt, so any who came after might steer clear, or might know where the ice was weakest, should they wish it broken. As the night unrolled its indigo tapestry overhead, he glimpsed strange constellations that never showed to those south of the wall. Scorched Crown, Swordbreaker, the Weeping Direwolf. His father had pointed them out only once, on a rare clear winter's eve, explaining that the Weeping Direwolf guided souls lost in snowstorms. Tonight that celestial hound paced across heaven's vault at Brandon's shoulder, its diamond chip eyes dripping luminous tears that faded into streaks of cold fire. Whether the omen was comfort or reproach, he could not tell. At midnight the silence frayed. A distant howl carried on the wind, not wolf nor white, but something vaster, as if the land itself remembered its agony and cried out anew. Brandon stilled every muscle, listening. A second howl followed, lower, mournful, a response. Then came the thunder of colossal footfalls crunching through the crust. The sound stirred memories of the animated giants he had once glimpsed far to the east, embalmed by time. Yet the cadence here was different, hesitant, almost limping. He crouched behind a splinter of ice and watched shadows shift against the snow's pale gleam. Out of swirling gusts lumbered a lonely colossus, skin stone gray, hair tangled with icicles. A giant, yes, but not the ferocious raiders of wildling lore. This one sagged beneath invisible burdens. Worse, it was alone. Giants roamed in clans. Solitude signaled tragedy. Around its massive neck, a crude iron chain clanged with each stride. At the chain's end rattled a squarish iron box the size of a horse's skull, carved all over in the same spiral sigils Brandon had seen on the broken stones of the circle. The giant stopped. Its cavernous nostrils flared, its sunken, irisless eyes fixed on Brandon's hiding place, as if sight were unnecessary. It raised one mighty arm and beckoned, not threatening, but pleading. Curiosity cut deeper than caution. Brandon stepped from cover. The giant knelt, knees booming into the crust. Steam boiled from its panting mouth. It set the iron box before him, then tore the chain from its own throat, flesh ripping like wet parchment. Blood black as pitch spattered the snow. It hissed, crystallizing into beetle-hard nodules. The giant did not flinch. Instead, it cupped massive hands, bowed its head, and offered Brandon a memory or a mercy. He could not be sure. Brandon touched the box. Frost crawled from the runes to his fingertips, yet the lid parted with a subdued click. Inside rested a single weirwood seed, bone white save a crimson cap, tiny beside the giant's, suffering yet fathomless in consequence. At its rootlet glimmered a fleck of obsidian, no larger than a grain of sand, embedded like a splinter. The giant spoke then, voice deeper than thunder, yet slurred by ages of silence. The language was the old tongue, but older still, a dialect only children of the forest should recall. Brandon deciphered fragments. Heart, return, thaw the chain. When the giant finished, it exhaled one last steaming sigh and toppled sideways. The impact carved a trench 5 yards wide. Its eyes dimmed to opaque crystals. Death claimed it without struggle, perhaps because it had surrendered to death the moment it tore free of its binding. Brandon mourned in the northern way, a bent head, a whispered vow to remember. He lifted the seed and felt heat radiate where frost should dwell. It throbbed in time with the tiny talisman needles now sprouting at Winterfell. Here lay another key, but to which gate? He nestled the seed inside his doublet near his heart. For an instant warmth flooded his veins. Mortal. Human warmth. Blood answered. Breath returned in deeper draughts. Color tinted his cheeks. The heart of winter within him blinked and yielded a fraction. He marched on. The shifting terrain blurred days into nights, into white blind stretches where sun and moon were differing shades of silver. Brandon marked each dawn by pricking his finger and watching how quickly the blood froze. After 3 such turnings he reached the Scour Pier, a jagged peninsula hammered by relentless winds off the shuddering sea. Pack ice bobbed against cliffs like prison barges, groaning as tides shrugged them upward. Here, legend claimed, the first night's watch had driven stakes of dragonglass into the ground to hem the others, but the stakes had sunk beneath successive winters. Brandon's path angled down a scree slope to the waterline where brine swirled, half slush. There, wedged among basalt outcrops, he found what remained of an ancient wharf. Pylons petrified by rime, ropes fossilized in glittering coils. Within the shelter of shattered hull ribs rested a small coracle sealed in pitch. Though worms had chewed the gunwale, the craft looked seaworthy enough to cross the strait to Agate Isle, a solitary fang of land, rumored to house a children's watch shrine. Mists writhed above the channel, hiding currents and hungry flows. He hauled the coracle into murk. The weirwood seed in his jacket pulsed, guiding his strokes, though snow clogged the air. When the mist opened, black-green water lurched around him, and the silence beneath those waves deepened until it seemed a physical pressure on his eardrums. He glimpsed shadows moving in the deeps, torpedo shapes that might be whales long extinct, or serpents from sailors' tales. He did not linger to parse which. After hours, keel scraped gritty sand. Agate Isle's beach glittered with frost-encrusted pebbles, each a swirling mixture of emerald and white quartz, as though the sea had churned jewels instead of shells. A single path tracked up a rise toward a ring of standing stones smaller than those Brandon shattered but carved in identical spirals. He scaled the rise. Within the ring squatted a domed hut entirely grown from fused weirwood roots, pale as moonstone, leafless but alive. At its apex burned a cobalt flame brighter than any torch, yet ice-cold. He crossed the threshold. Inside, the roots formed a ribbed vault hung with spheres of frozen sap. Within each sphere hovered scenes, snippets of histories trapped in amber. One orb held a vision of Brandon's great-grandfather warring against Karstark rebels. Another depicted Valyrian dragon lords forging chains for some unseen beast. Yet another showed Winterfell's godswood 2 centuries hence, ravaged by lightning, only to bloom brighter from the wound. At the domed chamber's heart stood a pedestal of living bark. He placed the seed upon it. Roots unfurled like fingers, cradling the seed, drawing it down. The blue flame above dampened to a guttering spark, then guttered out. In its stead, warmth suffused the chamber. Gentle sunrise soft, smelling of fresh-turned earth and distant summer fields. He realized then, the flame had been an inversion, siphoning warmth from the world to fuel winter's crown. By offering the seed, half weirwood, half dragonglass, he had quenched that siphon. The chamber trembled. A flicker of green shot through the roots, pulsing outward in widening rings as if Agate Isle itself exhaled. When the wave reached the standing stones, runes ignited, glowing viridian. Brandon stepped back outside. Across the channel, over the shivering plain, he saw a wonder. The auroras that had stained the sky in menacing spirals now rippled in straightened banners. Wild but orderly, their greens tinged gold like dawn. He tasted salt again, yet no longer mingled with copper pain. Perhaps the breach in the wall was mending, perhaps not. But something fundamental had shifted toward balance. He descended to the shore. The coracle awaited. As he shoved off, a low drone pervaded the air, vast as cathedral organs. The sea between Agate Isle and the mainland began to freeze, but not in serpentine cracks. Instead, frost blossomed outward in lace patterns, weaving a crystalline causeway behind his boat. He rowed faster. Upon landfall, he found a fresh set of tracks, narrow hoofprints, brisk and precise. No deer roamed this far north. Reindeer perhaps, yet these prints bore the faint outline of plated shoes. A rider. Brandon followed. The rider revealed itself in a clearing flanked by icicle-laden firs. A pale elk, eyes silvered with cataracts, yet bearing a yew-dark figure cloaked in raven feathers. The figure's face hid beneath a bone mask carved like a weirwood leaf. Child of the forest, or some new breed. The elk stamped once, steam-plumed. The masked rider spoke in that lilting tongue. Seed-bearer, frost-breaker, you turn wheels no mortal should glimpse. Brandon touched the empty scabbard. Wheels left rusting, I hope. Too late, said the rider. Some wheels spin once wound. Their rattle sounds long after the spinner's hand is gone. It dismounted, smaller than a human adolescent, yet dignified. The breach you sealed birthed cracks elsewhere. The night that walks has many faces, many keys. Then we must find them all. Brandon knelt to their height. Guide me. The rider removed its mask. Features fine as bird bone framed opalescent eyes, deep with grief. We cannot follow. Our songs fade. Yours endures. It pressed a tiny palm to Brandon's chest. Carry what hope remains south. Plant it where lions prowl and roses wilt. Winter no longer hunts only the north. Brandon's heart kicked. The south cannot fathom this war. Teach them. The rider hefted a seedling no bigger than Brandon's thumb. Its bark rippled red-white, and from its tip jutted a shard of milky crystal rather than a leaf. One seed left, guarded. He accepted the fragile life. It throbbed, acknowledging him. When he raised his gaze, the rider was astride the elk again. Snow swirled. They vanished soundlessly. The causeway behind him shattered then, ice plates splintering under unseen weight. Something roared across the channel. An echo of the throne's destruction perhaps, or a fresh wound torn in winter's fabric. He did not linger to decipher. South beckoned. Children and wife and hearth and hope beckoned. The march back to the wall took a fortnight by mortal reckoning. Hunger gnawed, but frostbite spared him. The rider's seed radiated a living warmth that offset the killing breeze. He snared a ptarmigan once, cooking it over a makeshift brazier of searing dragonglass shards, scraped till they sparked alive. Nights he dreamed of Alice humming to their daughter by the hearth, of Cregan chasing fireflies in summer's yard, of Walton forging new arrowheads under Lewin's watchful eye. Dawn, he woke to a world still gripped but loosening, yet omens shadowed his heels. He passed a field littered with ice spider husks bigger than war horses, collapsed in circles around a charred mound where dragonglass bloom fires had burned them from beneath. He skirted a frozen river whose surface cracked in the likeness of a sigil he did not recognize, eight-pointed like a star but skewed, corrupted. He saw burning mounds on distant ridges, blue flames that did not melt snow but devoured wind instead. On the 12th night he glimpsed the wall, black silhouette against auroral fire. Hope surged, only to stutter when he spotted a vertical fissure at the wall's western end, a furrow of darkness wide enough for a mammoth. Ice dust cascaded in silent torrents. The breach Walton had feared remained. Ravens circled. Their feathers glinted obsidian edged with frost. They did not caw, merely watched, as though awaiting verdict. Brandon raised a trembling hand in silent greeting. The birds wheeled and flew south, arrows black as grief. He took it as permission to follow. At the gate of the shadow tower he found chaos. Watchmen stumbling like drunks, faces flushed with fever despite the cold. Lord Commander Ricker was dead. Heart burst while lighting night fire. The new command, Sir Horst Yarwick, barked orders to plug the fissure with blocks carved from the wall's deeper layers, but every slab hauled into place splintered under invisible pressure. Men sworn to guard realms of men had begun to mutter about fleeing to Eastwatch, or south into the Gift. Brandon strode among them, voice carrying with a resonance he scarcely recognized. Hold. He laid one palm upon a fissured block. Frost flowered from his skin, fusing fractures. He pressed the seedling against the ice. Its root pierced with surprising vigor, and where it pierced, the crack sealed. The watchman gaped. Brandon whispered to the seedling, coaxing it deeper until its glowing rootlet wove like silver thread through the wall's wounded tissue. Cracking ceased. A hush fell. Sir Horst approached, helm in crook of arm. Stark, we feared you dead. I bargained with Winter, Brandon answered. Now it must bargain with me. That night he knelt atop the parapet, hands spread upon the ice, eyes closed. He let the old cold flow through his marrow into the wall, drinking in its creaks, its old sorrows, its patient vigil. Through that communion he felt other legions spiderwebbing far to the east, near a castle long abandoned. Fist of the first men. He would have to mend those too, but not alone. His blood still ran red enough to know limits. He called the garrison's trumpets at dawn. From the tower ramparts he spoke. Warden of the North I was born. Walker of the White Waste I have become. The breach you fear is not final, but more will open. Help me seal them, or flee and doom the realms of men." His breath steamed reddish as dawn's first light caught the frost swirling around his cloak. Some men flinched, others knelt. By midday 50 volunteers pledged to march east under his lead. 5 more offered ravens to carry word to Winterfell and White Harbor and even River Run, where Tully banners still fluttered. South of the wall, Lady Alice read the raven's parchment beneath the bleeding boughs of the godswood. Walton stood at her side, his hawk-like eyes scanning for doubt. The tiny talisman pine had grown knee-high, its needles still black-tipped, but now edged in pink. The parchment spoke of mending cracks, of a husband alive, of a new pilgrimage east. Hope kindled, and fear. She felt the tug to march north herself, children or no children, spear in hand. Yet Winterfell must stand, Brandon had said, as beacon. That very evening, a second raven arrived from Carhold. Word that Karstark patrols had slain walking corpses near the lonely hills. Hot tar mixed with salt water had kept them down. The fight spilled into the night, the air thick with frost. But come dawn, a strange green warmth melted the field, sparing wounded men. They swore they saw a banner of aurora gold ripple overhead like a blessing. Elise convened her bannermen, ordering stockades of dragonglass spearheads forged for a stalling protest. "Winter does not negotiate," she told them. "Yet my lord husband proved it can bleed. Follow his example or fall behind." Her voice, once gentle, carried iron now. Even grizzled veterans straightened. Brandon's eastward trek with the 50 proved grueling, gusts knifing flesh, whites harrying from treeline, then vanishing. But the undead seemed disorganized, lacking the malignant precision he had witnessed before. Their blue fire flickered uncertainly. Each time he drove the company's dragonglass-shod stakes into a fissure and planted slivers of weirwood root, whites in the vicinity fell as if strings cut. By the 5th ceiling they encountered only torn shrouds flapping in empty air. At the frozen oasis called Frostfire Hollow, they discovered a band of free folk sheltering around a dying pyroclastic vent, orange glow barely staving off coal. Their Magnar Marira, the twice-widowed, met Brandon blade drawn, but lowered her steel when she beheld the weirwood grafts on his palms, living threads of red and white, etching his skin where the seedling bled through him. "You reek of tree songs," she said, "and something else. Stormblood. Death kiss. Friend or nemesis?" "Both, if Winter asks," Brandon answered. "But friend, while men build fires together." He bartered obsidian arrowheads for healing herbs and took 3 of her best hunters into his band. They showed him hidden creeks that ran warm beneath thin ice, proof the land's veins still carried molten memory. Weeks turned. They patched the fissure near the fist, sealed a sinkhole of spinning snow devils deep in the gorge, and drove frost back from the foothills of the Frostfangs. Step by step, Brandon felt the cold within him recede. Not vanish, for it was grafted to his marrow now, but temper, as iron quenched. He could smile without ice crusting his lips. He could sleep and dream of things other than endless night. Yet he sensed a gathering gloom south of the neck. Ravens brought rumors. Blighted fields in the riverlands, white shadows glimpsed along the Red Fork. A market town outside Harrenhal found coated in rime though midsummer neared. The cold had bled south indeed. When spring's first pale sun tilted across the monochrome land, Brandon Stark turned his band around. They marched for Castle Black, rested, then followed the King's Road south in forced marches. In Moat Caelan's wetlands, they glimpsed frost-burned reeds and pools crusted thin with ice. This where dragonflies should dart. In the bog towns of the Crannogmen, they discovered trails of silt-white footprints that ended at riversides where no boat waited. The dead had begun to roam unmastered. By the time Brandon's column crossed the neck, word reached them that King Tommen Baratheon's envoys rode for Winterfell to demand explanations for unnatural snows and rumors of a northern sorcerer. The crown suspected treason, or worse, dalliances with fell powers. Brandon quickened his pace. The banners of Winterfell appeared at the skyline 3 weeks later. Smoke curled from every chimney. Archers watched walls, thronged with townspeople eager for tidings. Top the gatehouse tower fluttered a new sigil. Direwolf argent, but crowned by a diadem of black thorns against an aurora goldfield. Brandon passed beneath it, and wondered who had designed the heraldry. It felt a prophecy, not a boast. He dismounted in the outer yard. The ground, once scorched by his frost, bore new life. Tufts of hardy grass, early crocus blooms, waxy and defiant. The talisman pine in the godswood now stood the height of a grown man. Its needles had faded from black to deep wine red, and tiny cones dangled like bloody teardrops. He exhaled, a sigh mingled of shame and relief. Winter had taken root, but refused tyranny. Cregan burst from the crowd, taller, wirier, eyes shining. He halted a yard away, uncertain. Brandon knelt, arms wide. Only then did the boy rush into his embrace. Warmth flooded both. Lady Alice approached, cloaked in Karstark white trimmed with stark gray. Her gaze traced every change in him. The strain of travel, the eerie calm in his eyes, the living scar-like roots threading wrists and palms. She brushed her fingers lightly along his cheek. Where once frost bloomed, now nothing but a coolness like dawn dew. She smiled, brave, tremulous. "You came home," she whispered. "I promised." He kissed her brow. Around them murmurs swelled, swelling into cheers. But the jubilation lasted mere minutes, for the south still stirred. Sir Horst, accompanying him, relayed reports from ravens. Lannister gold cloaks mustering in the crossing castles. Tyrell riders sighted near Hayford. Baratheon envoys demanding access to Winterfell's crypts. Fear of necromancy bred suspicion faster than wheat. Brandon summoned his council that night. Aelys, Walton, Lewin, Cregan, stern in boyish determination. Merera the free folk Magnar, and 2 representatives from the Watch. They met beneath the carved rafters of the great hall, while spring snows drifted outside dark windows. "The South will come," Brandon said. Words at first, questions after. "We can answer," Alice insisted. "Show them the pines, the sealed fissures. Kings see only threats to crowns." Brandon unrolled a new map, one he inked on the march, marking each breach and seal. "If we fight men while night regathers, we lose the true war. We must convince them this winter concerns every hearth, not northern pride." Maester Lewin stroked parchment-stained fingers through his beard. "A conclave, then. Call every High Lord to Winterfell before summer's heart. Show proof, share weapons of dragonglass. The children's seeds your own." He gestured at the living tendrils in Brandon's skin. "Transformation. They may call him abomination," Walton grumbled. "Some septons already whisper it." Brandon met his friend's eyes. "If I must be abomination to end an age of terror, so be it. I am done hiding." He rose, snow dusting off his cloak where none had clung. "Send riders. Write letters on maester chains. Invite ally and rival alike. Offer safe passage and room at our hearths. Let the South taste northern hospitality and northern truth." Best. Spring's apex saw a pageant of banners streaming toward Winterfell. Lions and roses and cranes and suns, storm hearts and krakens, trout and falcons, wyverns and manticore sons. The lords came with retinues armed for war, yet desperate for answers. They beheld snows melting where Brandon passed, saw pale saplings with dragonglass thorns sprouting in the training yard, watched ghostly frost wolves patrol parapets made of nothing but swirling mist and heart's winter. Fear flickered in their eyes, but hope, too. Brandon greeted each personally, bare-handed, letting them feel the cool but living flesh of a man half ice, half wolf, wholly unyielding. He listened to their grievances, spoiled harvests, vanished shepherds, lakes frozen in a night. Then repeated a simple refrain. "Winter changed, but we may change it back, together." The summit convened in the godswood on the vernal equinox, the air fragrant with newborn needles and sap-dyed. Lords circled the weirwood, swords sheathed, as Maester Lewin read aloud the chronicle of Fisher's seal. Children's runes glowed on parchment. Dragonglass blades were laid out in crates. Walton demonstrated their shattering of ice-white bones. Merera and her free folk spoke of the price their clans had paid, swearing fealty to no southern crown, but to the survival of humankind. Then Brandon stepped forth, unsheathing only the empty scabbard. He told them of the Comet Heart throne, of the choice between ruling endless winter or breaking it, of burning away fragments of his soul to regain warmth. He bared his forearms where crimson and white vines interlaced his veins. "The wall is a gate and a promise," he declared. "I mended cracks at the price of my certainty. Now I ask you to pay the price of fear, to trust what you do not understand, to wield blades you did not forge against a foe you cannot corral." Silence settled, thicker than snow but warmer. It was Lord Mace Tyrell, portly, perfumed, who broke it. "You ask the Reach to trust northern superstition. We grow roses, not legends." Brandon addressed him gently. "Your roses will blacken when frost that cannot thaw descends. I would rather see them bloom." "Mawanin." Tommen's own hand, Sir Giles Rosby, coughed his way through skepticism before Queen Marguerite, keen-eyed and quick-witted, stepped forward. She touched the young talisman pine, and when its crimson needles pricked her fingertip, she did not recoil. "Life," she said simply, showing the bright bead of blood, not undeath. From that drop of blood new needles budded pale gold. Gasps rippled. Marguerite met Brandon's gaze. "Teach us," she said. Others soon echoed. And so the pact of the red sapling was struck. Each house pledged glass and grain and men to the watch. Each southern maester received a sapling seed bound with a sliver of dragon glass, sworn to plant it in their own godswoods, or sept gardens or courtyard groves. Brandon taught them the words to coax root through stone, words given by the children and by winter alike. Within days the first seeds sprouted in pots warmed by braziers, living witnesses to a covenant broader than any king's justice. Yet shadows lingered. Far to the east, ravens whispered of sorcerers in Corth freezing canals, of white leviathans haunting the summer sea. Winter's heart was wounded, not slain, and Brandon felt nightly the faint tug of that wound, a summons clawing toward him through earth and dream. The conclave disbanded with vows sealed in smoke and green sap. Caravans rolled home. Brandon watched them from the battlements beside Alice. Snowmelt puddled atop towers, dripping like gentle rain. "Did we shift the wheel?" she asked. "We nudged," he said. "Enough perhaps to pivot fate." "Will winter abide the pivot?" "Winter never abides," he answered. "It challenges," we answered. He drew her into his arms. Her warmth seeped through him. Frost did not bloom, only dew. He kissed her hair and closed his eyes. In the deep heart of the lands of always winter, echoes stirred, shards of the shattered throne congealing. Black frost wreck-knitting around an empty space where once a king had stood. Night had lost its first champion, but not its will. It gathered shape slowly, learning from fracture the virtue of patience. Brandon dreamed of that remnant, forming a new visage, less a monarch than a mirror for the fears of mortal hearts. He woke before dawn and watched pale light silver, the pine's blood-dark needles. Somewhere beyond those walls, the weeping direwolf star faded from the sky, replaced by a new constellation, a broken crown encircling a single flame. He rose, donned fur-lined leather, and strode to the gate where Walton awaited, axes on shoulder. "You felt it?" the knight asked. Brandon nodded. "South, this time. Stormlands perhaps, or further. We ride at noon." Walton grinned, teeth flashing in the chill. "Thought you'd never ask." As Brandon mounted, the courtyard brimmed with volunteers. Northmen, Reachmen, Free Folk, Night's Watch, Karstark Bowmaidens, Dornish spearmen wrapped in fire silk, all bearing dragonglass blades and sapling seeds tucked near their hearts. No single banner flew. Instead, each clasp bore a patch of red and white leaf, the emblem of the pact. Brandon raised a gloved fist. Blood under flesh, frost under blood, He felt the twin pulses harmonize. They rode out beneath a sky where the aurora gleamed soft and orderly, no longer spirals of doom, but sweeping veils of color, like curtains awaiting the next act. Behind them, Winterfell's walls glittered not with rime but with fresh dew-catching sunrise. The old words rang within him, "Winter is coming," yet they carried new cadence, less foreboding than galvanic. Winter is coming, yes, but we go to meet it. Winter is coming, and we do not kneel. Winter is coming, and we ride. Brandon Stark, once lord, once almost king of ice, now bearer of seeds and breaker of frost, led the company south, swords bright with fire caught in glass. Ahead lay fields turned to mirror, villages hushed under false snow, beasts wandering without breath. Ahead lay a night grown cunning, rebuilding its crown from splinters. But behind Brandon rode men and women who had seen impossible things and still chosen hope. The war for Dawn had begun anew, not in a single cataclysm, but in patient marches, in saplings, in shards of glass warmed by living hands. And somewhere, carried on a breeze that smelled faintly of pine and salt and molten stone, the children's dying song shifted key. Mourning eased into anticipation, as if they too dared believe the wheel might turn toward sunlight.